Want to see if the PowerPoint presentation works? Simply it's eating the words. Just showing the pictures. Okay. As was mentioned before, my name is Graciella Romero, and I work for War on Want as the International Programs Director. And as you might know, War on Want is a campaigning organization working in partnership with organizations, social movements, grassroots movements in the south and also in the north. And one of the topics that we are working for quite a long time is the issue about food justice, food sovereignty. And that's related to many other topics that we are covering in terms of the workers' struggle, the workers' rights. So as you know, War on Want is a long-standing organization working for the workers' rights and with the trade union movement around the globe. So I'm really pleased to be with you here this morning, almost this afternoon, because I think it's a really good opportunity for sharing ideas and building the movement around food sovereignty, but more importantly, movement against capitalism. And I think this is a great opportunity to build resistance. We need to build resistance against the corporates, against the governments that are witnessing the takeover of the corporates and then not doing anything, basically being complicit of that. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I wanted to show you some pictures, but it's not working, so I'm going ahead. The issue for me is that what is happening just now is nothing new. If we think back when the Industrial Revolution, and even before that, when the whole colonization period, when the imperialism was rampant, and were taking over land, resources from other countries, from other continents. You have the United States in Latin America, you have UK and Europe in Africa, and they were taking lands, they were taking resources. They were the biggest land grab that I ever seen, ever read of. And if you think that's for some purposes, that's for purposes is to set up the capitalist system. And what happened here in the north, because it wasn't just in the southern countries, it was here as well happening. The whole clearance of the highlands in Scotland, the whole clearance of the countryside here in England and Wales, to be able to take all those farmers and people living from the farm, from the land, towards the factories, to become slave wage slaves, to become, like, maybe you might know better than me, Mas will say, just another part of the engine, just giving production. You don't have anything to give, just with force. And that's what happened with the people all over the world. So it's the setting up of the capitalist system that we are seeing, and this is what we are also seeing in this time. I just want to go back in the history just to remember ourselves that we cannot keep saying business as usual, and some governments are saying, like, the whole crisis that Europe is having just now, and trying to have the same solution that they have in the past. If we keep thinking in terms of the history, we will see what happened in the 60s with the whole Green Revolution that was set up mainly by companies and by states like the United States government, telling the world that they needed to produce more food, they needed to produce cheap food, at the expenses of what? At the expenses of the people, the livelihoods of people, at the expenses of the land, the environment. And then you have all the industrialized agricultural system, with irrigation system, that the only people that could afford that were companies who can afford a plane, who can afford to buy all this machinery, only corporations. You have all the pesticides and pesticides and chemical inputs for agriculture. You see, by that time, people were also taking up the land. You will see all these peasants moving from one state to the other, for example, in Brazil, or even in the States. What happened with all the producers of cotton, and you might have read the book of the grapes of growth. Very good example of how that happened in the States, and then happened in the southern countries. All the countryside were moved towards the cities. And that's thanks to the Green Revolution. That was the miracle of the Green Revolution. Later on in the 70s, you will have farmers in India that were lured with the chemicals and pesticides, killing themselves, committing suicide with the same pesticide that they have to buy to produce cotton because the yields didn't go up in the way that they were told it will be. So you have all the massive destruction of the livelihoods and the environment. And then what happened next? When people have been basically taken, evicted from the land and not being able to produce their own food, then they come the World Bank telling countries and telling people, actually you need to change your policies. You need to stop to produce food, stop to be self-sufficient, and become dependent. Dependent on what? Dependent on companies coming into your country to produce food for export. And then opening the country, the economies for all the investors from the foreign countries. And also all the policies that we are seeing just now, when all the cuts and all the policies that the government is implementing, or the European governments are imposing on us, is exactly what happened in third world countries with the structural adjustment policies that the World Bank imposed to those people. So that's, if you see the disasters of the Green Revolution and then the export-led economic model, and then telling these countries, you must open your markets. You have to allow other countries to sell you cheap food, or even to give you, for aid, cheap food or genetic modified food, because that's the way that we can live happily. But this, you see, is completely opposite. You see people in these countries losing their own sufficiency, their food sovereignty. Exactly, that's what they're losing, the opportunity to produce their own food, to be autonomous, to say what food they want to produce, how they wanted to produce it, and how they wanted to distribute it. So this is all a change of events, of facts, that we cannot forget, because it's exactly what is happening just now. The new package that governments are telling to us is that we need to produce more food. And the UN secretary said that there is almost 1 billion people going hungry, but we don't need more food. It's enough food to feed the world. But they need to tell other lie to be able to keep business as usual. So they keep telling us we need to produce more food, and we are going to produce it with the genetic modified, and it's pushing for the agenda of the corporations again. And this is the UK government. This is the Department of International Development, DFID. They are funding these policies. Back in January, they presented the report saying, yes, we need to have sustainable intensification. What is that? What monster is that? They're trying to co-opt the terminology of social movements, of progressive movements in their own agenda. And they're saying, of course, we need to have genetic modified food. So this is the new thing, but it's not a new thing, it's the old story. And we need to understand that, not to get with the false idea that, yes, it might be that the world is growing so fastly in terms of population that we need to produce more food. It's not true. The amount of waste that we have in this country is 1 billion tons of waste in this country. It's enormous. So if we think about that, and this is just in the UK, so there are other reasons, and the reasons are because the corporates are taking control of the food. Tesco in January reported that 3.7 billion profits. Well, millions of farmers are losing their land and losing their livelihoods, where many thousands of retailers, small retailers here in England, are losing the shops. They're putting away those small shops. You see Tesco everywhere, Sainsbury's everywhere, Starbucks everywhere. So it's happening again, and this is what we need to be conscious of, that that's what's going on. The interesting thing is that people haven't been silenced to this movement, and we need to revive that fight. We need to resist, and that's what, if you think in terms in the 80s, when as a response of the Green Revolution we had in Latin America, the farmer to farmer program, Campesino a Campesino, which was the reviving of a new technique to produce food. To produce food in a sustainable way, what we call in jargon terms agroecology. Basically, as you might do in your own garden, having no input of chemicals and just using what you have in your hands. And people think, oh, you need to learn how to do that. Actually, it's common sense. I'm thinking, if the whole planet is destroyed, how are you going to produce food? You will go again using your common sense and doing it. And this is in simple terms, but this is a science. The agroecology is a science that people have been studying grassroots movement have been starting. And that's what happened in the 80s with this program, Farmer to Farmer. And then you got all the movement again, the trade justice movement, fighting against the trade liberalization and all the WTO and the agricultural agreement that was included in WTO in the 1994. So people are been fighting back. And now when you see our colleague here was talking about the Arab Spring, well, this is a real success, and seeing people from the ground. And it's not just finished, you know, it's still there. And it's false, or it's just, let's don't call ourselves too lies to say this is the revolution happens in one day, 1 month. A revolution is an ongoing process. And the biggest example is Cuba. It's an ongoing process, 60 years of ongoing, 50 years, sorry, I lost my count here. But it's years and years of fighting to keep your own revolution. And talking about resistance and talking about how a sustainable way of producing food and distributing food works, Cuba is the biggest example. It's not really well known because, of course, it's not the mainstream, and people don't want to show us a mainstream. But Cuba is the biggest example that food sovereignty works, not just as a production of food, a system to produce food sustainably, but it's also about a political and economical strategy. And it wasn't implemented in Cuba out of conviction by people. We had recently one of the speakers from Cuba, one of the expertise on this area, working with farmers there, and he was saying to us, no, it wasn't because we believe in that. I was one of those convinced that we should go into the industrialized system. But when Russia stopped, the whole deal with Russia stopped there. They had to go back, as I was saying before, where you don't have food, you need to grow food in any way that you can. So out of hunger, he was saying the best advice was hunger. They had to go back and then produce food in a sustainable way. And effectively, the whole production of food and the hunger in the country went down. But you know, as we tend to forget, and that's why I try to keep memory what was happening all over the history, because it's really easy to forget. They forgot what happened, and when the country went up a little bit in economic growth, they went back to the same using chemicals and fertilizers and all the rest. And they noticed, of course, it went down, and the livelihoods of people were destroyed. So now, out of conviction, they are producing food. And he was explaining how the connection between the farmers and the consumers needs to be there. It's not about you being a farmer there, or a producer there, and be here a consumer. You should be a producer as well, in your own right. So this is to say, this is the resistance coming from below that our colleague was talking about as well. This is the resistance from below, but also we need to think how to change the structures at international level. And this is again the food sovereignty movement then. This is when we got the sovereignty movement in 1996, when people from 170 countries, 70 countries and 150 organizations say, well, enough is enough. The food securities of the world that people, the governments are saying, we are going to fill the world with the food that we produce with genetic modified food. That's going to resolve the problem, but not addressing the issue, how this is going to be produced, is it sustainable, is it healthy, and how this is going to be distributed. It's going to be distributed by Walmart or Asda or Cargill, or is it going to be produced in the hands of Monsanto's? So they never addressed that issue. So people said, we are going to fight that. We need to have a model, a framework that works for everyone, that had all the components. And that's the beauty of food sovereignty. It's not just talking about techniques. It's talking about politics and economics and social issues, as I said before. And I don't know if you have seen, but I put it at the back, a small leaflet with the principles of food sovereignty. And it's interesting to see, because if we don't understand the whole concept, we might get into trouble. Because if we're thinking, oh, it's too complicated to understand. But when you start to break down the concept or the framework, you understand what we're talking about. We're talking about the right to food for all. The right to food, culturally and appropriate food. Meaning you are not going to eat in Mexico when the big disaster after the trade agreement, the NAFTA with the States, when they lost all the food, the self-sufficiency, they end up eating wheat bread when they are where the born of where the maize born, basically. It's the culture of maize. The tortillas disappear. Now they're buying tortillas. They cannot produce their own food. So this is when we are talking cultural repeat. Here in the UK, you eat all around the year tomatoes, apples, whatever you want. And no one wonder why we are eating all this when we don't produce this food. When at the expenses of who? I was meeting an organization in Bangladesh that all their land has been polluted. Most of the land in the coast areas have been polluted and the waters, producing shrimps. And now they're saying, well, here we eat shrimps like in the UK. It wasn't the main staple here. Now it's becoming more. Why we change our diets? We are conscious of that when you go to the supermarkets and you find all the food that you find there. You say, oh, this is great. But actually, we are just like mice in a cage. They give you what they want you to eat. And if you live in a poor state, and if you are black, or you are from an ethnic minority, well, you eat rubbish. Because this is what you end up eating when you go to Tesco's in those places. So this is what food sovereignty is talking about, is the possibility of having the right to food, the food that you choose. But also it's talking about agrarian reform, not just about land reform, not just about accessing land. It's about accessing resources, it's about getting credits, it's about having research on sustainable technologies, it's about having the government with you working, no corporations. It's having the possibility to do it in your own way. The other one is protecting the natural resources. Of course, it's the same issue. If you don't have seeds, if the seeds are taken away after our beloved Green Revolution took away all the seeds from the farmers, what are you going to produce? You need to buy the seeds. It should be outlawed that. People should be able to have exchange seeds freely. So this is why we're talking protecting natural resources. We should ban corporations going to, like in Kenya, where they are producing flowers and destroying the whole Lake Naivasha. Was there? We work with plantation workers in there, and the way they treat the workers. These companies producing flowers for the UK, because Max Spencer and even the Co-op bringing flowers from Kenya, and now moving towards the Ethiopia, because capital doesn't have frontiers. Workers are slaves of that. And this is the biggest problem as well. So we have, in that, protecting the natural resources, we're also protecting the biggest resource of a country is human resources, the workers, and they should be protected. But on the contrary, governments are promoting, saying, we got all this land and all this cheap labor, come on, we're selling. They're prostituting themselves. And this is outrageous, because they pretend like, I was in Mozambique, and one person, the high minister of something like that, he was saying, no, it's great. So I was asking how you're going to deal with the markets. And he says, great, Walmart is coming. I'm thinking, you're kidding me. You see this as the biggest solution. It's going to destroy the whole small markets. It's going to destroy the whole women that go out in the streets to sell their own produce, because there's no, but for them it's the biggest solution. So this is part of protecting the resources, protecting the human capital, protecting the land, protecting the water, protecting the seeds above all. And then you have reorganizing the trade. If you are starting to think that you are going to produce food for export and they are going to become rich, well, you are in trouble. You are in trouble. This is exactly what happened with the structural adjustment policies. You started to produce food for others. You started to produce food for the north. And what happened with your own country, with your own population? They are dying of hunger. Sorry, I think I'm running a little bit late. I'm going to try to wrap up. So the trade is really important to reorganize that. It's really important first to feed your population, self-sufficiency, and then if you got leftovers, and then you trade, and then you see what are the regulations for that trade, and how is that going to affect your forced labor, but also your resources. Then of course you need to have the globalization of hunger. You need to end up with all these big international institutions just trading and trading with all our resources, with human capital in the way that they want. We need to stop with the WTO. We need to keep going for that. The Doha round was stopped, but we need to continue with that. The other two principles of the food sovereignty, and this is what I'm talking about, is social, but it's also political. It's social peace and democratic control. If you don't have access and decision on the policies that rule you, well, you are out. You are out of the business. You are just simply another ship running behind the government. Social peace, why? Because food has been used as a weapon. People have been evicted, displaced in a violent way in many countries. In Brazil, I've seen how rows of people standing beside the sugarcane plantations, and they're trying to get a little bit of land, and beside there's a big army tank. And one thinking, is this protecting them? No, 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 they destroy the whole encampment. The night before, they destroy the whole encampment. And these people think, well, this is what is happening all the time. So it's destruction as well. So we need to think about, food sovereignty is talking about social peace as well. But social peace, not as a utopia or as something rhetoric. No, social peace means that you have access to your food, that you got access, you decide what you want to eat, you decide how to produce it, you have work that pays a living wage, no pittance, and also you have the possibility to access into the decision making and how you make policies. So this is the big circle, as I call it, and I said in another meeting something like, this is for me the yin yang. It has everything included there, and we need to tackle in every corner that we have, and we need to join forces on that. It's not for one organization, it's for one social movement. Like my colleague was saying, it's international movement. It's the South with the North. It's the producers, the consumers with the workers all together. So this is what we need to build, and I think this is great that we are having opportunities like this to gather and to discuss about these issues and to build resistance. The occupation in St. Paul's, this is one thing that we need to keep supporting and saying, well, this is the grassroots going on. They're reclaiming the fields, people. This is coming from the grassroots, and we need to keep supporting that. And it's not easy. It's not easy to negotiate because there are a lot of issues. There are ideologies. There are many things on behalf around our heads. But I think the food sovereignty movement is giving us that possibility of, it's a political agenda, it's an agricultural agenda, agroecology, ways of producing food, but also it's about social issues. It's about inclusion. And I just want to finish with that, and I'm really happy to hear your thoughts on that, on those lines. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. That was fantastic. Next speaker is Pierre.
Hello. Well, my French English after the British South African English. Sorry for it. So I would like first to introduce some facets of Asia and Asian farmers or peasant struggles. I don't know what is either scientific or politically correct word to use in England about farmers or peasants. As a way to introduce Maria, by the way. And I would like to address also the issue of the relevance of these struggles for us, including in the North, because I think these struggles have a lot of relevance. And the problem is not only to support their struggles, but also to learn positively